The Marriage of Anansewa, 1975, by Efua Sutherland, one of Ghana's most celebrated dramatists, is a witty, socially insightful, and culturally rooted play that blends traditional Akan storytelling with modern theatrical techniques. Often described as a comedy of identity and custom, the play uses the Ananse figure, a trickster Spider-Man from West African folklore, to explore themes of marriage, materialism, female agency, and the tension between tradition and modernity. Set in mid-20th century Ghana during a time of socio-economic transition, the play critiques the commodification of marriage while celebrating the resilience and wisdom of women. Sutherland's innovative use of the concert party style, music, and storytelling marks the play as a seminal work in African theater, one that reclaims indigenous performance forms while engaging with contemporary issues. The central plot revolves around George Kwaku Ananse, a charming but manipulative clerk who is struggling financially. He lives with his daughter, Anansewa, an educated young woman whose future he wishes to secure, though more for his own benefit than hers. Realizing that Anansewa's beauty and education make her an ideal candidate for marriage, Ananse decides to send letters and photographs of her to 4 wealthy chiefs, each with the hope of securing her hand. His plan is to play the suitors against each other and marry her off to the highest bidder, thus improving his own economic standing. However, when all 4 chiefs propose marriage at once, Ananse finds himself in a dilemma. He must decide which chief to choose without offending the others. To solve the problem, he fakes Anansewa's death, staging a mourning ritual that buys him time. He declares that Anansewa had chosen one of the chiefs before her death, without revealing which one. Eventually, Anansewa miraculously recovers, and Ananse decides on the most generous and powerful suitor to be her husband, chief who is chief. The other chiefs are pacified with the explanation that she was spiritually betrothed to the chosen one before her illness. The play ends with Anansewa happily preparing for her marriage, having had some say in the decision. Ananse is triumphant, having used cunning and theatrical flair to manipulate tradition for personal gain, but not without learning a few lessons along the way. Major themes: 1. Marriage and commodification. At the heart of the play is a critique of marriage as a transactional arrangement, particularly for daughters. Ananse treats Anansewa as property to be auctioned, negotiating with 4 chiefs based on wealth and status. Sutherland satirizes this practice, showing how patriarchal and economic forces intertwine to control women's lives. However, the play avoids being entirely cynical. By the end, Anansewa exercises some agency, and her happiness becomes part of the outcome. Sutherland thus balances criticism with hope for reform within tradition. 2. Trickster motif and social satire. Ananse is modeled after the Ananse character of Akan folklore, a spider trickster known for his cunning and manipulation. In the play, George Ananse is not evil, but self-serving and comically deceitful. His antics provide humor, but they also expose flaws in social norms and values. Through Ananse's scheming, Sutherland satirizes the obsession with wealth and social status, the bureaucratic nature of courtship rituals, the hypocrisy in cultural and religious practices. 3. Female agency and empowerment. Though initially presented as a passive pawn, Anansewa evolves into a more self-aware and assertive character. She questions her father's intentions, expresses her emotions, and finally participates in choosing her own fate. Sutherland foregrounds the emotional and intellectual complexity of African women, challenging stereotypes of docility. While the patriarchy is not dismantled, the play opens space for women's voices and choices. 4. Tradition versus modernity. The play explores the tension between traditional customs and modern aspirations. Ananse uses traditional betrothal practices but exploits them for modern capitalist gain. Anansewa's education is a symbol of modernity, and yet she is still subjected to customary marital practices. Sutherland does not reject tradition, but rather advocates for a harmonious synthesis, a way to preserve cultural identity while allowing for evolution and individual freedom. 5. Performance and identity. The play is highly meta-theatrical, drawing attention to its own performative nature. Characters play roles within roles. Ananse stages mourning, Anansewa acts her death and resurrection. Sutherland uses this to highlight how identity is shaped through performance, especially in social and cultural rituals. This theme also echoes the concert party style, where actors, musicians, and audience often blur boundaries between life and theater. Character analysis. George Kwaku Ananse. A charismatic trickster, Ananse is both protagonist and antihero. His motivations are selfish. He wants wealth and status, but his actions are humorous rather than malicious. He represents the improvisational survival tactics of many African men navigating a system stacked against them. Ananse is also a symbol of cultural transformation. He uses traditional practices but adapts them in absurd, self-serving ways. While his deceit is criticized, his creativity and resilience are acknowledged. Anansewa. Anansewa is intelligent, beautiful, and emotionally nuanced. While initially controlled by her father, she gradually asserts herself. Her ability to play along with her father's schemes, and even influence the outcome, shows her growing autonomy. Anansewa symbolizes the emerging modern African woman, rooted in tradition but aware of her rights and desires. Her education and sensitivity mark her as a hopeful figure for social progress. The four chiefs. They remain largely off-stage and symbolic. Each chief represents a different form of power, economic, political, spiritual, but they are also subject to Ananse's manipulation. Their exaggerated portrayals and indirect communication reflect how status and reputation often overshadow personal connection in arranged marriages. Supporting characters, audience chorus and storyteller. Sutherland uses a narrator and chorus to guide the audience, provide commentary, and inject humor. This structure, drawn from African oral tradition, allows for audience participation. Moral questioning. Dramatic irony. It also underscores the idea that storytelling is a communal, reflective process, not just entertainment. Structure and style. Sutherland adopts the Anansism storytelling form, a traditional Akan narrative style, and blends it with modern drama conventions. The play is structured like a storytelling performance with a narrator who introduces scenes, transitions between acts, and addresses the audience directly. The dialogue is lively, idiomatic, and rhythmic, often punctuated with songs, dances, and gestures. Humor plays a key role. Sutherland uses comedy not to trivialize issues but to disarm the audience and encourage critical thought. The nonlinear, episodic structure mirrors oral storytelling. The play unfolds like a series of tales or parables, with each episode contributing to the thematic whole. Symbolism and motifs. Ananse's figure embodies cunning, adaptability, and the contradictions of tradition and modernity. Photographs and letters. Symbols of modernity and commodification, tools by which Ananse markets his daughter. Death and resurrection. Anansewa's staged death mirrors theatrical transformation, a symbolic rebirth into agency and marriage. Bride wealth, Labala, represents both cultural heritage and the danger of reducing women to property. Cultural and political context. Efua Sutherland wrote The Marriage of Anansewa during a period when post-independence Ghana was grappling with questions of national identity, cultural heritage, and modernization. Traditional customs were being re-evaluated in light of new political and educational movements, particularly those concerning women's rights and youth empowerment. Sutherland was part of a broader movement of African cultural nationalism, aimed at reclaiming African forms, languages, and aesthetics from colonial suppression. Through her work with the Ghana Drama Studio and literary activism, she championed theater as a tool for social education. This play reflects that mission, advocating for a redefinition of tradition that prioritizes justice, dignity, and agency. Comparative literary context. Ama Ata Adu's The Dilemma of a Ghost also deals with the clash of tradition and modernity, and the role of women in navigating cultural tensions. Wole Soyinka's The Lion and the Jewel, similar in its use of humor and folklore to critique gender roles and cultural change. Ngugi wa Thiong'o's early plays share Sutherland's emphasis on reclaiming indigenous forms and themes for African theater. Conclusion. The Marriage of Anansewa is a delightful yet deeply incisive play that uses folklore, music, and comedy to explore serious questions about gender, power, and social change. Efua Sutherland reclaims African storytelling not as a relic of the past but as a living, adaptive form capable of critiquing injustice and imagining better futures. While the play critiques patriarchy and materialism, it does not discard tradition. Instead, it proposes a dynamic, evolving culture in which old forms are infused with new meanings. Through Anansewa's journey from object to subject, Sutherland celebrates the possibility of agency within constraint, and transformation through performance. As a work of both art and activism, The Marriage of Anansewa remains a cornerstone of African dramatic literature, a joyful assertion that even in systems of control, there is room for resistance, laughter, and change.